I think from an idea perspective, we had a very strong belief that this will work.
You had a very strong belief it would work because you are a contractor and you had faced this pain, or because people were telling you that from the customer base?
So we knew that that top-up part is definitely a massive pain point for the contractor, and we're going to get that.
Were you trying anything to get orders?
That such quantities that we wanted to experiment it with, it could only come if you were doing perf marketing.
How much did you spend?
The first ad campaign, I think, went live with a 20,000 budget.
And nothing came out of the 20,000 rupees? Zero?
I think on the last...
What point did you feel that this has product market fit, this is working?
I remember a day where we did not do justice to an order and delivered it in like 3.5-4 hours. And I think we got a 1-star rating on Google. That was our first 1-star rating.
Yeah.
The next day when I woke up, there was another order from that same customer who had given a 1-star rating. And I was like, all right, we are now at least in a play where the need is so much.
What was the first thing that you did on day zero? We're back with Zero to Momentum. I have Pukhraj, the founder of HomeRun, here today. And before I turn it over to Pukhraj, first of all, thanks for having us in your dark store. We are here. I'm super excited. We are in his dark store amongst cement bags and paint cans, but we'll tell you more about it. Pukhraj, thanks for doing this.
The pleasure is all ours.
What does HomeRun do? Let's start there.
Right. So in a brief gist, HomeRun delivers construction and interior materials to homeowners and contractors in 60 minutes.
Okay, wow. So it's quick commerce for construction materials.
Right. And this happens through our inventory-led dark stores and our own fleet of EV vehicles.
Okay. And why did you pick this? Why was this a problem? And who is it a problem for?
So building materials is an extremely large market in India.
Correct.
It's about a $250 billion market. Divided into two components, you have the wholesale and the retail. Retail is about 25% of it.
Okay.
Now, the retail market, how does it look like is, if in any Indian city you go around on a road, on the left and right, you would see shops selling paints, plywoods, plumbing and sanitary wares.
Correct.
Now, that's a market which has operated in the same way for the last few decades. We felt this is one of those problem statements which is hidden in plain sight.
Okay.
Plus, in my life, I've had the chance to work as a contractor for a few years.
Sure.
Built a significant number of residential homes and a large number of commercial projects. So we feel this problem statement intrinsically.
Okay.
And it made a lot of sense to solve for the contractors and homeowners of this country.
Okay, awesome. So you sell construction materials to people building a store in a mall, or if I'm renovating my house, you probably don't sell to real estate developers or prestige or anything, right? Who is this for exactly?
So if I were to divide our use cases, those would be 4.
Okay.
I'd say the first one is if you were building your own home, an independent home, G+1, G+2, let's say in Koramangala in Bangalore, then you would be buying materials from us.
Okay.
Second, if you were to buy any apartment or a villa, and then do up the interiors before you move in,
okay,
then the materials that you would need, you would buy from us.
Okay.
The third use case is all the shops and establishments in the city. So all the cafes, boutiques, small offices that you see in the city.
Yeah.
The fourth one is all the repair and maintenance for all the residential and commercial spaces. So those are the 4 specific use cases for which HomeRun comes in.
Okay.
The other use cases, which are the large capital and the commercial projects, those are not our customers.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So quick commerce for construction materials. I want to go back to day zero, when you first thought, I want to do this business, I want to test this idea. What was the first thing that you did on day zero?
So I think the first few weeks just went on in deciding which is the first SKU that we start with.
Okay.
And which is the micro market that we start with.
Okay.
So those were the first 2 decisions that had to be done.
Okay.
We decided on Sarjapur Road as the first micro market.
Sure.
I think I traveled to all the 4 expanding geographies and corners of Bangalore.
Okay.
Decided upon Sarjapur Road because there's just a massive tons of construction happening there.
Okay.
So that became the decision on the micro market.
Where to start with, yeah.
Right. The second one was the SKU.
Okay.
we chose a very counterintuitive choice on that,
Yeah.
which was cement bags.
Okay.
Now, the reason for that is twofold. One, cement bags are needed in a massive frequency.
Yeah.
So that's a high frequency purchase.
Correct.
Second, for the 4 use cases that we discussed, a typical requirement of cement bags is within, let's say, 10 to 15 bags a day.
Correct.
The current supply doesn't do 10 to 15 bags and tend to have a minimum order quantity at 50 bags.
Yeah.
So there was a clear white space available over there for us to come in.
Okay. So by the way, they have suppliers doing 50 bags. So for that 4 bags, 2 bags, if I'm a contractor doing a small apartment, I was going to those Kirana stores and buying 4 bags.
Yeah, so you would send one of the workers to these stores,
Okay.
which would be a cement store.
Okay.
And they would probably go in a rickshaw
Okay.
or have a small vehicle,
Okay.
pick up those 10, 12 bags and come back.
Right.
Now, that's a massive pain in the daily project work, right?
Okay.
And if you're doing your own home, let's say your own apartment interiors,
Yeah.
you're probably going to need the cement for, let's say, redoing the tiling in your bathrooms, or you would need the tiling up in your kitchen.
Yeah.
We saw this is a great point for us to get a foot into the door in the project.
Amazing.
And I think looking back, the decision has turned out absolutely beautiful.
And I'm going to touch on that in a little bit. So you picked the micro market Sarjapur Road.
Right.
You picked cement bags. Then what did you do next?
So the next bet was again a counterintuitive choice. For us, if you would see, this market has always operated on I have a need, I will have to call someone, give out my requirements, get a quotation or a price, and then make the payment, get the material.
Okay.
So we said if we were to execute retail at scale, we will have to be 100% product.
Correct.
Now, being 100% product means bringing customers online in a category that they have previously never transacted in.
Correct.
So the first thing that became is let's make a very simple website.
Okay.
A website which is transaction focused.
Yeah.
We chose Shopify as the tool for that.
Perfect.
Made a lot of sense. Very easy to learn at my end.
Yeah.
I remember the first few days, we chose the templates available on Shopify.
Yeah.
It came out a pretty ugly looking website.
Okay.
We chose 4 types of cement bags that we wanted to sell it with.
Okay.
Got those products in, made the website live,
Yeah.
and then just prayed to the gods that we believe in that the order will come.
Yeah.
And none came.
None came. Okay. Were
Right.
you trying anything to get orders?
So the first bit was to start with a few ads.
Okay.
Because at such quantities that we wanted to experiment it with, it could only come if you were doing perf marketing.
Correct.
Right. So spent
ads.
a very small amount.
How much did you spend?
The first ad campaign, I think, went live with a 20,000 budget.
20,000 rupees and to be exhausted over what? A month?
This was a 7 days budget.
Okay.
And then we waited.
Okay. And nothing came out of the 20,000 rupees? Zero?
I think on the last day of the 7, the first order came in.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
And that order was from what type of customer? Was it a contractor? Was it a homeowner?
It was a homeowner.
Homeowner. Okay.
It was a homeowner who placed an order.
Okay.
And I think by the time he would have refreshed his screen, I had already called him up.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was sitting on that and the order came in. And I remember speaking to him and saying that we are all ready and we will have this delivered to you in the next 45 minutes.
And so you had a Shopify template site, 4 SKUs of cement bags.
Right.
Ads running, very simple. You pick the product, you pick the micro market. And then did you have some cement bags or were you just buying them retail for this test experiment?
We got, I think we were optimistic and we got 50.
Oh, you had bought 50 cement bags. And where did you
50.
keep those 50 cement bags?
Right. So that brings us to how we decided on the first dark store.
Okay.
I think from an idea perspective, we had a very strong belief that this will work.
Okay. Okay.
So we went ahead and took the decision.
And sorry, you had a very strong belief it would work because you are a contractor and you had faced this pain, or because people were telling you that from the customer base? Why?
I think it's the former.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
because
basically you had done it, kiya hua tha, so you knew. Okay.
Right.
Huh.
So we knew that this is going to work.
Okay.
It is only a matter of whether we will get only the top-up purchases,
okay,
or the core purchases of the project as well.
Okay.
So that was the first, in a way, the PMF point that had to be, let's say, weighted upon.
Okay.
But in terms of transactions happening, we were pretty sure. Because in a project, and this is important to understand, if you assume, let's say, a spectrum of all contractors in this country.
Yeah.
On one side of the spectrum, you would have the largest of the contractors, say the L&Ts, Shapoorji Pallonjis of the world.
Correct.
They have large planning functions, purchase functions. 95% of the purchases planned, 5% unplanned.
Correct.
You move to the other side of the spectrum, that's your small contractors. These are the contractors who are building all the residential and the small commercial projects in your city, any city.
Yeah.
If you would see, these are usually 1 or 2% plays. They don't have any planning function. Almost all of their purchases unplanned.
Yeah.
So the way their day starts is, they would have some purchase planned today, which they are going to send to their site tomorrow. And when the day starts, they will have some inputs coming in from their team. X site has, let's say, a Fevicol over, they need it. Y site needs 2 sheets of plywood. So we knew that that top-up part is definitely a massive pain point for the contractor, and we're going to get that.
Amazing. Amazing. So going back to that first order on the 7th day, you got the cement bags. Then what happened? Did you increase the budget? Did you change something in the website? Did you call that person again and try to sell them more? What was the second test?
Right. I think, so when the first order came, a lot of happiness came. And then the second order did not come that day. So we started the next day with that same hope. And the good part is we got 2 orders the next day.
Amazing. So how was it also from ads?
This is also from ads.
Okay.
Right. Okay. So now in my head, I'm thinking that, okay, the ads are working.
Yeah.
We now have a 2 order day. The third day, I think we again got none. Okay. And then you feel a massive amount of sadness.
Yeah.
But then at that point of time, it was just, you start your day, glued to the screen.
Yeah.
You are looking at the dashboard, waiting on an order to come in.
Yeah.
And then you're refreshing the abandoned carts to see if there is a person that you can call out and get that purchase through if there are any issues in terms of trust of the platform.
Correct.
Because it's a bad looking website at its best.
Correct.
So I think the entire next week went through that.
Okay.
There were sporadic orders.
Okay.
I remember at the end of last week, we had a day where we had 5 orders.
Yeah.
And that felt amazing at that point of time.
Amazing.
So the next week was that.
Amazing.
At that point of time, I realized that, okay, this is going to work. So we start working on the Shopify bet and bettering our product. I had a very clear view in my mind of how this should look like.
Yeah.
Now, the reason was we wanted the customer to come in, have a very simple transaction optimized experience on their mobile. We knew that all of these transactions are not going to come in from the web, but from mobile, because contractors are on mobile almost all their time.
Correct.
And they are on the site.
Yeah.
So they don't have access to the website version. Even today, if you would see, our website version looks much poorer than the mobile one.
Yeah.
Because it's all optimized for mobile, right? 98% of our traffic on the web comes in on the mobile.
Did you get some help then to make that Shopify site better in that 2nd or 3rd week?
No, I think, we took up the...
Yeah.
So actually, Shopify is not geared for quick commerce, right?
Yeah.
Shopify is geared towards typical D2C use cases of 2 to 3 days delivery and is shipping based. We then took up the basics of Shopify and started just mapping everything that we could to make it...
who's we at this point?
Currently, it's just me.
Just you. So very quickly, what I want to recap is 50 bags of cement obviously doesn't require some big capital, so that can be managed. How did you deliver those first 2-3 orders? Because you didn't at that point have a delivery fleet or anything. So how were you delivering it?
We had one rented vehicle.
One rented vehicle, and let's say that was some monthly rent, etc. We can get into that. Did you? How much money did you have to first shell out for any kind of storage of that dark store?
So I think considering we are in a play where the dark stores can be in relatively less dense areas of the city.
Correct.
That's not a large amount.
Understood.
So typically dark stores...
So what I'm trying to get to is capital was not the bottleneck.
Capital is absolutely not the...
So you got started, you had Shopify, 50 bags of cement, you had orders, then you started bettering the Shopify site. Then what happened?
Right. So at that point of time, the next bet was, all right, we now know cement is gonna sell.
Correct.
Let's start the next category.
Correct.
So since cement is a bagged product,
Yeah.
and the vehicle is now designed to carry on those bagged products, the next part was to take on another bagged bit.
Yeah.
To us, that was putty. So that's the product that's used in painting.
Yeah.
So you will use putty to smoothen out your walls before you apply the final coat of paint.
Sure.
So yeah, we took in putty and putty started to sell.
Amazing.
Then we took on tile adhesives and tile adhesives started to sell.
Amazing.
And by this point of time, we are in a play where we are doing approximately 7-8 orders a day.
7-8 orders a day consistently
Yeah.
across these two products. Now, let me ask you this, and then of course we'll go a little bit later and what other SKUs came. But what was in the this whole thing was what, 60 days from the start of you just putting out that first Shopify thing, 50 bags?
Yeah, I think this would be about
Very
30 to
quick.
45 days.
And you stayed focused on Sarjapur Road.
Correct.
And the ads were there. What was the biggest bottleneck at that point where you were like, hey, yaar, is this even going to work? What was the bottleneck? Was it just sporadic orders ads, or what was the bottleneck exactly?
I think
the stuff you were buying retail right now, we
Right.
don't need to worry about the margins to test
Right.
this. So what was the bottleneck?
I think the initial bottleneck was building trust for the consumers.
Because of big behavior change.
And if you would see, this is a market where there is a lot of fraud materials already in play.
Yeah.
There's a lot of duplicates in play.
Okay.
Plus, these are high ticket values, right?
Sure.
You're asking the consumer to transact in multiples of thousands,
Correct.
not the typical 400s, 500s that you're used to
On Swiggy
Swiggies and the Zomatos of the world, right?
Correct.
So, asking that customer, even for a payment on delivery order,
Yeah.
to go to that and make that purchase, considering that material is going to be used in their house, and for both homeowners and contractors, ensuring that that material is of good quality is extremely important.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they're going to build their house once in their lifetime.
So trust was the big thing, the Boolean thing that you were trying to solve.
Right. And I think we did solve that by adding a lot of trust markers on the website.
Okay, like what?
So
what trust?
each time when someone would purchase a material, we would keep on popping up their purchase history live on the website, saying that, okay, Mr. X made the purchase for 15 bags of cement.
Correct.
Mr. Y made the purchase of 10 bags of putty and so on.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
And
so like social proof validation. They're
Right.
seeing other people's orders.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
so that was one bit. The second was, like I said, we quickly started to optimize it. The website on the app started to look much better, much cleaner.
Amazing.
I think by the end of 2 months, it looked as if it is from a proper organization and not a,
And I know you were tweaking around with it, messing around with it.
Right.
Was that like you use no code, low code tools? You had
Yeah, I
some
think that's the
help,
good part
or
of
Shopify environment.
That's the good part
help?
of Shopify.
Okay.
That's the good part of Shopify.
Sure.
So
Okay.
most of the issues that you would face, there are already apps inside the Shopify app space
Perfect.
marketplace that you can just use to plug it in, do some tweaking, and you have a working MVP at play.
Got it. So now let's take this a little forward with, and you can feel free to talk about what happened with the third SKU or whatever. But at what point did you feel that this has product market fit, this is working? Like this is working on a recurring basis and at scale it will work?
I think I'll need a second to ponder over that.
Yeah, please
Yeah,
do.
actually, I think that's an interesting thought. To my mind, it came in, so we had ratings, right? We would push everyone to do a Google rating as soon as an order was delivered.
Sure.
So our stack was Shopify, and we had mapped that to WhatsApp. So we used WhatsApp for all the order updates, all the support communication, and to date, WhatsApp is our channel that we use for. I remember a day where we did not do justice to an order and delivered it in like 3.5, 4 hours.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, rather than the 60 minutes thing. A vehicle broke down and so on and so on. And I think we got a 1-star rating on Google. That was our first 1-star rating.
Yeah.
The next day when I woke up, there was another order from that same customer who had given a 1-star rating. And I was like, all right, we are now at least in a play where the need is so much.
Yeah.
So in my mind, I compared to, probably days when you would order something from Swiggy or Zomato.
Yeah.
They would not do justice to that order. But the next day you have no other choice but to go to them and place the order again. So in our small
Amazing.
world, we were able to see it
Amazing.
as...
What a hilarious irony. The
Right.
1-star moment seems to be your product market fit.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. And then I think the stars started lining from there on.
Yeah.
We kept on adding SKUs. Customers loved our experience.
Yeah.
We made sure we do a lot for each order.
Yeah.
In terms of ensuring the delivery SLAs are met, the
Yeah.
customer experience is met.
Yeah.
If in an odd scenario the customer has any issue, we provide the best experience out there.
Amazing.
So customer experience has been at the crux of what has brought HomeRun even to this stage.
Got it.
And most of our customers have immense love for our platform.
Yeah.
And even today, 50% of our acquisition is organic in nature.
Okay.
So that means it's coming in through
word of mouth referrals,
word of mouth,
etc.
Right.
So, couple of things to round up this, validation journey. Even though we are most interested in literally how you got started and solved those bottlenecks at day zero, but the two connected things to that is, as you came to the stage where you were like, this is working, ye chal raha hai. You obviously, this is a ops heavy execution business. So there, talk about, and I know you have experience with that, but there talk about how were you thinking about delivering this? Because it's still a very physical business. Drivers have to get in, people have to load on time, you have to deliver in 60 minutes, etc. So how did you focus on that as the orders were growing, and what were some of your, fundas there, so to speak? And then I want to finally just come to price and margins as you experimented how this would work.
Right. Now, I think fair point. We knew one thing, that if we were to do justice to the operations, we will only have to do one thing and one thing only.
Okay.
So for us, if you would see, we made various decisions at the start, which give sense to this focus.
Yeah.
Early on, we would have customers who would say, can we come in and buy the materials themselves? I'm right around the corner, or I just live next to your warehouse. So the decision was whether do we do only delivery or whether do we do walk-ins as well.
Sure.
We said no walk-ins, only delivery. So again, focus on one thing that we do.
Amazing, yeah.
The second is, early on you would get orders which will say, okay, can I get 50 of this quantity? We knew that we had an operational fleet in which has a maximum payload. That payload for us was 750 kgs. So we put in a limit on our app, on the Shopify website, which said you could only buy 15 bags at one point of time.
Oh, wow. Beautiful. Okay.
So each point of time, there would be someone coming in onto a support chat and saying, I need 50 bags or 100 bags, while your business mind will say, do stuff to get this order. We said we will not be the best choice to buy the materials to the customer directly.
Sure.
That if you need 100, you may probably go to the distributor and buy it. We only do this.
We only do 15.
We only do
this. That is so
15.
deliberate.
Yeah.
Now, did that person do like multiple orders of 15?
I think...
does that behavior seep in?
Yeah. So we still have customers who will do, and we have now increased the range to a 30 for us. So that's
nice. Okay.
1.5 metric tons on an order is the limit on HomeRun as of today.
Okay.
But you would see orders coming in consecutively for even 6 or 7 back-to-back orders.
Okay.
Because the experience that customer has with those limited set of materials coming in is so great that they say, all right, I have no issues in, probably doing 7, 8 back-to-back orders.
Amazing, amazing. So when we are talking about how you are handling ground level logistics, it seems like these two like you made deliberate choices, whether it's quantity, vehicle, you standardize that so that you will be able to give that service. What else on the people side? Like how have you, I believe you have now, I think 4 or 5 dark stores in Bangalore.
Yeah, we have 5 dark stores.
Right. So how do you think about that organization and on the people level? Because you're doing a lot of this in-house. It's just not a website, I know.
I think that's a great question and also a right question to ask in terms of who should be the folks who should form your initial team.
Correct.
And I think when you're starting out, you would be lucky if you have folks who bring in only 3 facets to the day and to the team every day.
Okay.
One, they should be sincere.
Yeah.
They should have a lot of hunger and they should have integrity.
Yes.
nothing else matters, right? I think you don't have to care about their pedigree. You don't have to care if they have done this job before.
Correct.
The only thing that matters is that initial team has a belief in what we are doing.
Yeah.
And they show up every day trying to do it better than yesterday.
And how did you find some of these people very early on?
I think I'm lucky. I had the
That's honest.
yeah. I had the chance to have my initial team with folks who were there with me in my previous avatars throughout.
Yeah.
Lucky enough to have folks who trusted me
Yeah.
to lead this charge.
Yeah.
And retrospectively, I think, that made the initial a hard climb much easier.
So that's great. Some of them followed you from your,
Right.
previous work that you did, which is also always amazing. Were you now all of this test is coming live? It's clear this is a burning, maybe obvious or non-obvious, but a burning problem is now being solved. Did you then worry about testing that? Will I be able to make money on some of these things? Maybe there is a point where you start buying wholesale and all of that, but how did you approach that journey to, okay, what margin will I land at? Will I be able to charge like a retailer's margin, etc.?
I think I'll again go back to the point where we decided what we will sell and we decided what we will not sell.
Correct.
Right. So we are in an industry where there are, thousands and lakhs of SKUs. And each SKU that you decide to sell will bring upon shelf space, working capital load, and an overall organizational bandwidth load.
Yeah.
So for us, it was important to know what will sell on HomeRun and what will not, and then move down to the margin and the, let's say, the entire P&L stack of that particular category.
Makes sense.
So, like I've been saying various times, we are in an industry where there are three types of materials. We have no selection, low selection, and high.
Yeah.
We already knew that the high selection part has the highest of the margins. But that also involves, in the Indian context, the customer going out into the market, looking at that item, which is a design item, trying to feel that item, and then deciding upon that.
Yeah.
So we
like
said
fabric or curtains or something.
Now that could be your wallpapers, decor items,
Yeah.
veneers, and the marbles of the world, or
Yeah.
the tiles of the world, right?
Correct.
So we decided we are not going to do that.
Perfect.
We are going to focus on the 80%, which are commoditized branded materials.
Right.
So once we knew that, we knew what is the margin profile we are playing in.
Yeah.
And we are aware of the fact that we are in a business which is a lean margin business.
Yeah.
So that means everything down from there, down to the last operational and market expense needs to align to that.
Yeah.
Once we had that range in, we started working in ensuring that we sell a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
And then just start moving up the value chain in that brand, in that category, to ensure that we start purchasing from the highest level in that particular value chain,
Yeah.
which ends at the brand level.
Got it.
And once you do that, a significant margin profile opens up,
Yeah.
which makes the business pretty sorted.
That's again super deliberate.
Right.
You put a lot of constraints to to be in your swim lane so you can go faster. Now, I obviously know your numbers. Don't worry, I'm not sharing this, but would you like to share how many orders per day you're doing right now?
Yeah, currently we do about 250 orders a day.
250 orders a day from that 2 orders
Right.
at the end of the 7th day. That's amazing, man. Well, thanks for doing this, and lots of luck to you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks,
Thank you for
thanks,
having me here. Had a great one.
Perfect. Again, a lot of great lessons about, starting small, starting early, doing experiments. But the biggest insight that jumped out in me uniquely to his story is how he put constraints, very deliberate constraints, to grow faster and validate one large problem. So, for example, he purposely said no to walk-ins and focused on delivery. He purposely focused on just a bag of cements, like making it super narrow compared to starting with 4 SKUs like paint as well, because that's what the customer would need. And he purposely focused to make his operations life easy, focus on Sarjapur Road. So the universal lesson for anybody doing any kind of business is it's very easy to get carried away with what your customer would want, but to put deliberate constraints to validate faster seems to be a pretty winning strategy.